Welcome to Scrollin', a podcast about the Elder Scrolls Online. I'm Ket.
I'm Davius.
And this is episode number 45. I guess it's technically week 2 of PTS, even though week 1 was really short. It started Thursday of last week, right? So week 1, it was like half a week.
Yeah.
But now we're in week 2, so it's PTS version 6.3.1, but it's all really minor stuff. I read through the whole patch notes multiple times trying to find anything
really
worth,
like, give me something.
Just anything at all. But it's all just kind of fixes and adjusting these new dungeons and stuff like that. Really not much worth talking about.
Yeah, you make a good point there too. Like the short week probably has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah, totally. But we have had a chance to log into the PTS and just get in there and figure a lot of this stuff out and draw some conclusions. I think there's still a lot that is going to have to shake out over time. Mm-hmm. But I think we've wrapped our head around a few things and have a little bit better understanding of at least where to start to get our characters on the right path to fitting in with this new meta and this new situation here.
Yeah.
So whenever this patch drops, first thing you're going to notice is that you don't have any skills on your skill bar. Skill bars are totally empty. So you open your skill menu and then you'll notice that all of your skill points have been completely refunded. So you're going to have to go through all of the different skill trees and repurchase all of your passives and all the skills that you need. But don't worry, they're all completely leveled up and ranked up just like you left them. You don't have to redo any of that stuff. But you do have to take the time to just go through and repurchase all of that stuff.
Know your bars.
Know your skill bars. Take those screenshots now. I think this is related to that werewolf thing, right? To when werewolves lost those couple of skill points and the devs just don't know how to give them back. They made a forum post a few weeks ago talking about this happening. I don't remember the technical details, but basically, long story short, is they have to refund everyone's skill points, and then at the end of it, werewolves will have those couple of skill points back, I guess. Hopefully this time. Wouldn't it be hilarious if after that
it's still you're still missing like 2 skill points? Like,
actually, no, still no skill points.
Still not working. Somewhere out there is a werewolf character that they still have refused to play with their werewolf. Not until they get their skill points back.
No, sir. Obviously, your champion points will have been refunded as well. But that's to be expected because it's this whole new system. There's really not going to be a way to map your old setup on this new one. So just expect that. So once you get all your skill points and champion points and all that stuff set up, probably the second thing you're going to notice is that your character's stats have just gone absolutely through the roof. Like they are completely roided out. Like
the best shape of their lives. This is it. This is the prime.
Oh, it's beautiful. You're just looking at the stat sheet and you're like, oh my gosh. Like every character gets an extra 1,000 weapon and spell damage, which I missed that in the patch notes. I did not see that anywhere in the patch notes, but maybe we just overlooked it. So all of your characters have an extra 1,000 weapon and spell damage. Also, your max stats are way higher, like almost, well, it's like an extra 5,000 of each, or even more of health, right? Isn't it health like 7,000 or 8,000 extra? Something crazy like that. And that's without champion points. I wanted to talk about this just a little bit because I think there are some interesting implications, and it just brings to mind some questions that I don't have the answers to, but I'm really curious to find out. So at base, your character is going to have 16k health, right? You make a brand new character. You have no champion points. You come out of Cold Harbor, nary a skill point to your name, right? You're just wearing the prisoner's rags, no weapon, no nothing. You've just been born. You have 16k health.
It's crazy.
I think that is pretty crazy. Especially when you consider that like a PvE DPS build, 16k is like exactly the bare minimum health that those builds shoot for to do like veteran PvE content, like end game trials and stuff like that. Like 16k, those builds shoot for 16k, and then everything else gets invested into their maximum offensive stats. Because if they invest anything more than 16k, it's just a waste because it's a damage loss. So it's interesting to me because you're at that 16k already. We're not even talking about like, once you start equipping armor and you start investing skill points and unlocking passives and stuff like that, like you're going to be sitting at 20k health easy without even trying, without even investing in it at all.
Yeah.
It just is an interesting thought because I'm curious about what kind of food PvE DPS builds are going to end up using, because any investment in health is going to be a waste, right? So if you use blue food that gives you a health stat, you don't need that health. So I don't know. I don't think you need anything that gives you sustain either, because sustain has been majorly buffed. Sustain is really easy right now, especially in an organized group. So all I could think of is that just like standard single stat green food might be the best thing to use for a PvE DPS build, which seems crazy to me.
It's going to be the new way to go. Just the food that you're crafting as your level 1 cooking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been out of like the PvE endgame, scene for a while. So maybe there's something to it that I'm not taking into consideration. If any listeners want to write in, scrollandpodcast@gmail.com. I can't imagine using anything other than green food unless that bare minimum has gone up. Maybe you do need more than 16k for some of the really hard stuff these days. But even so, even if 20k is kind of the recommended amount now, you're going to hit that easily without even trying. So I'm just really curious about that. Now, what you were mentioning, Davius, in PvP, yeah, you're going to hit like 30k health. With Battle Spirit and everything else, you're going to be sitting at like 30k health easily. Yeah. Once you start trying to actually invest in health and stuff, I think people are going to have absolutely astronomical amounts of health. It's going to be ridiculous. I think people have already been asking to take the health bonus away from Battle Spirit, and I think that's probably a good idea. I don't know if it's going to happen or not.
It's an interesting idea, but I'm kind of with you. I don't know. We can talk more as we kind of go through this, but I kind of have some thoughts on that I want to bring back up here in a second on the Battle Spirit type of things. But
sure, what are those thoughts?
Well, so we're going to kind of talk about it, and we had a chance to get on PTS and we had some fun doing some tests and stuff, but it kind of feels like they're setting up to no longer necessarily have a need for no CP in Battlegrounds. Maybe
possibly so. That occurred to me that they're bringing them closer, right? CP and no CP are much closer to each other than before.
It just seems like they're really bridging the gap that existed there before, because any players that play ESO know no CP and CP, two different worlds,
very different worlds.
All these changes, I just can't help but think that they're really kind of bringing them together. It doesn't seem to be as big of a difference now.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I want to talk a little bit more about these max stats here. So that's one thing. I think maybe getting rid of that health bonus from Battle Spirit might be a good idea. It's a suggestion I've seen a lot of people make. It sounds like it might be a good thing. Another thing, Davis, that we had talked about before is the implications for PvP Magicka builds. Mm-hmm. It seems like they might be particularly benefiting from this stat increase, because like every build is getting this stat increase for all three stats, but stamina builds, they're only going to make so much use out of that Magicka, and beyond a certain point, they don't need that Magicka. They don't care if they have that Magicka or not. It's not really a big deal for them. But for Magicka builds, having that much extra stamina is a very big deal. And again, without, just kind of like with the health that we've been talking about, with very little investment or maybe even no investment at all, your Magicka PvP build is already going to have like 15k stamina, which is, in no CP, for me, I think that's enough for a Magicka build. So that's interesting too. That's going to affect like your food choices or your attribute points or your glyphs or stuff like that. It's going to be very different getting your builds dialed in because you just kind of already. And the thing is, like, it's different from the other stats. Like with health, okay, everyone has 30k health, so you have to have 30k health too. You know, everyone has 40k max magicka, so you have to have 40k max magicka too to be competitive. But with stamina, no additional stress is being put on your stamina bar as a magicka build than before, right? You're not getting CC'd any more than before. We're already being CC'd on cooldown, you know?
Yep.
You're not having to block anymore or sprint anymore or anything like that any more than before. So you just have all this extra stamina with no additional strain on your stamina pool. It's a really big deal, I think, for magicka builds. It's going to be really, really nice. It's
really interesting that they seem to be getting, especially in PvP, they're getting the benefit more than the stamina builds for sure.
It's a good thing. I mean, stamina has been reigning supreme for a very long time, so I think that's totally fine. I feel good about that. So one would assume with these like Hulk-like stats on your stat sheet, you would be thinking like, all right, let's get to the target dummy and see what this baby can do. And I'm here to tell you that you're probably going to be disappointed because right now on PTS, it looks like we've lost about 30% damage, although a lot of that seems to be unintentional. I think there are just some bugs with this new champion point system and some passives that just aren't working right now. Mm-hmm. Word is that we're expecting to lose about 10% total DPS. Once it's all said and done, when the patch goes live, you can probably expect to lose about 10% DPS from what you have right now. Even though your stats are so much higher, this new champion point system is so much more reined in. You're not getting nearly as much from it as you used to. So you know you're just not going to hit quite as hard in a CP environment, in a CP PvE kind of environment. Mm-hmm. I think that is actually to be expected. Ever since way back when they started talking about revamping this champion point system, I've basically been assuming this whole time that is synonymous with the power creep patch. Whenever the champion point patch comes, that's also going to be the power creep patch.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you know, we talk about it, you know, in past episodes all the time, is that you run into characters with CP and it's like it seems like, you know, half the time it's like, all right, we're just going to hit on each other for 30 minutes and nobody's going to die.
Oh yeah. That's always what people complain about in CP PvP is everyone's just a target dummy. Nobody ever dies. It takes forever to kill anyone.
Yep.
Although this patch, that maybe isn't so much the case. It's always, you know, if CP PvP feels good, then non-CP feels terrible. And that's kind of the case right now.
Yeah.
Although that might be changing here pretty soon. But at any rate, I think, at least for PvE purposes, addressing the power creep has been necessary for a long time. I think it's a good thing. So
yeah, I mean, think about how, you know, we joke all the time that we do veteran dungeon runs in our PvP gear and are half asleep through the runs. So
right.
Good thing to address, I think.
Yeah. So expect to lose damage with your CP setups, but on the other hand, for non-CP builds, you're going to be much more powerful. I've found that I've gained about 30% total damage on my non-CP builds. Now that's against PvE monsters and target dummies and that sort of thing. So what that tells me is I think the new player experience is going to be much smoother. It's going to be a lot easier on them with all this new health, this new 15% damage mitigation, an additional 1,000 weapon damage, and all that stuff. They're just going to have a much smoother time getting through those quests and fighting through those mobs with no CP and all that. But the question is, you know, of course, your character is so much more powerful, but also everyone else's characters are equally more powerful. So how much damage are you doing against other players? So Davius, you and I, we did some testing on this just last night on the PTS. You basically just were a target dummy for me, and just kind of stood there and let me kill you over and over again.
Best target dummy you've ever had.
Let me tell you, fine target dummy. Maybe could you just stay logged in 24/7 and just like hang out in my house, and I'll just come test on you all the time. But anyway, we had a lot of fun testing, and we came to some interesting conclusions. I think long story short, if you want to fast forward to the end, it does take a little bit more effort to kill players in this new situation than currently on live. Mm-hmm. And we are talking about a non-CP situation. I want to emphasize that. It takes a little bit more effort. Exactly how much more effort is going to depend on your build. Sure. And this is getting into a really interesting discussion about stat-based builds versus proc-based builds. So far, all we've been talking about is our characters getting these massive stat increases, like these gargantuan stat increases. But guess what doesn't care about your stat increases whatsoever? Proc sets. Yep. They're not phased at all. Like, they're all fixed values. They're going to deal the exact same amount of damage no matter what your stats look like. So your player abilities, your active skills that you can use, like Dizzy Swing and stuff like that, those are going to be dealing a ton more damage against players. And meanwhile, your procs, they have to deal with this increased health bar that everyone now has, plus this additional 15% mitigation that they didn't have before. So procs across the board are just dealing less damage than they did before, while everything else is dealing more damage than they did before. And with stats, with like stacking stats, there comes a point where there's this like magnifying effect, right? Where you get past a certain point and you just have like just this unbelievable amount of stat going on there. So I just think we're entering a new meta that I think we're taking a big step away from the proc meta. I don't know if proc sets are going to be like totally in the dumpster, or if they're just going to kind of be a viable option that you can mix into a build here and there. But as it is right now, it's just like proc sets and Malakath. That's the only way to be competitive in a battleground.
For sure. Yeah, I think the feel that I got from it is that this is going to really work to bring procs down to the kind of to the average. Because right now, like you said, in serious high level PvP, it's all proc builds. If you don't have a proc build, you're already at a disadvantage. This, to me, is just going to bring more balance to builds. I think proc builds can still be really good. I think they'll still perform. But there's no reason for, if you want to really have your best PvP experience, that you have to have a proc build. I think that's going to go away with this.
Yeah, honestly, I think I'm kind of predicting that like the very best, meanest players that we see out there are probably going to be using stat-based builds.
It would make sense. One thing I was just going to mention that, and I was curious for your thoughts on this. So this is kind of where I was getting at with removing the Battle Spirit buff. And I can see on paper why that makes sense. But when we actually kind of really tested it out, it was more of an effort to take my characters down with the increased health. We definitely both had that feeling. But with the massive amount of stat increase, I was surprised that it wasn't like it was a little bit harder to kill me, but to me, it wasn't just an insane amount.
Well, it kind of depends. Again, like, so I tried with my Stamina Templar, Old Betsy, who is very much a stat-based build. And I would say, like, compared to PTS, we did a side-by-side comparison. It took Betsy maybe like one additional global cooldown to kill your character, like one extra skill cast.
Yep.
Whereas my Stamina Dragon Knight, who is very much a proc build, it's 3 procs in Malakath.
Right.
It took her more like 3 global cooldowns.
Right.
3 additional global cooldowns to kill you on PTS. So 3 extra skill casts. That's a significant difference between those two, I think, between a stat-based build and a proc-based build.
Right. And where I'm getting with this is that I think that, and at least in my take of what Battlegrounds are now and kind of what those tests led me, is that I think it's going to lead to a better Battleground experience. Right now, proc-based builds are doing so much damage that it's leading to just deaths everywhere. Anybody can kill anybody, and it's just, we talked about this in the past, just how easy it is to die all over the place. People in Battlegrounds are just dying all over the place. And so it's kind of pulling those proc sets back a bit. And I think it's just enough of a survivability buff that it's going to make Battlegrounds feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I really do think that no CP PvP is going to feel much, much better than it currently does. I'm very much looking forward to this new meta. I think, if anything, the complaint might now become that people are a bit too survivable, and maybe it feels a little bit too much like CP PvP. That might end up being kind of the way that it tips. But we'll see. I think they're going to have a lot of ability to kind of dial things in over time. With a lot of this stuff, you really just can't know how that meta shakes out until it goes live, until we get a flood of players in there to really work it all out. Because until then, all we're doing is just dueling, and dueling is not the way to figure out PvP balance.
Well, and I think an easy fix for that is that, when we go into these Battlegrounds, if things feel a little bit too tanky and not enough kills, then, like we mentioned, you just can knock out that 5k health Battle Spirit, and that would probably fix it. And one thing we talked about is werewolves. They initially we're talking about some nerfs for werewolves, but stat-based buffs, that is a beautiful thing for werewolves. That's going to be great for them.
Might not be getting nerfed as much as it seems, perhaps. So I think that no CP PvP, I think it's going to feel a lot better. Jury's still out on CP PvP. I think there's going to be less of a difference between non-CP and CP PvP, like we were just saying. But as far as how it feels, I have a feeling it's still going to be a lot of tanky builds running around, a lot of people that are hard to kill. But we'll just see. We've always been more all about the non-CP stuff, especially Battlegrounds. It's probably going to still be the case, but I like to jump into Imperial City. I was thinking about what's a non-CP Imperial City going to feel like now, because our no CP characters are so much more powerful than they used to be.
You think we're going to be able to take those mobs down without it seeming like you're ramming your head into a brick wall?
Yeah, I think it might not be such a slog. We might actually stand a chance against those bosses down there and stuff. I still, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record this episode, I still go back to, if I really try to take a step back and look at this thing, I really get the vibe that they're trying to mesh no CP and CP. They've turned CP into they've turned the CP system into what no CP is. No CP is it's your character, and you have to strategically choose skills and strategically choose the areas which you're going to benefit, and you take the negatives, and hopefully the areas you're choosing to buff can hide those negatives or overcome those negatives, or you just play the character based on knowing those negatives. And to me, with these changes to CP, is that they've only added another layer to that. It's the whole point of this new CP system seems to still be you choose your focus, you choose your linear focus, and you're still going to have gaping holes, and you just hope that your playstyle or choices are going to overcome those gaping holes. And so, is Gaping Holes the name of our episode?
Oh, geez, people are going to, whoa, what happened on this one?
We're no longer a podcast about the Elder Scrolls Online, guys.
Things have changed. But that's the thing that just keeps going to the front of my mind, is that the CP system has changed so massively from a system, because it used to kind of be like this blanket over your character, is that no CP was like this raw version of your character, that it was just strategic choices, and you just kind of have to go with what your strategic choices are, and you're going to have to make up your shortcomings. And the CP system was kind of like, okay, your CP's on, it's kind of like put a blanket over your character, everything's safe. And now they've ripped that blanket off, and it's just like another layer of what no CP is over the top of it.
It's like now this new CP system is like a nice layer of icing on the cake.
Yeah, that's
your character's the cake. Previously, your character was 90% icing, right?
Yeah.
In CP, it's like 90% icing, 10% cake. Now it's like a more, it's a better cake now.
Looks better, probably tastes better.
Yeah, it's more moist.
That's that word, That's the way half our listeners just shut it down.
Just unsubscribe just then.
But yeah, that's the part that and we'll talk about the CP system, but that's the part that really stands out to me is that they have talked about for the longest time they wanted CP to be more strategic. And that's why we love no CP, because it seems, in my mind, it seems more strategic.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we didn't have to have two different modes. We just have one that's well balanced, and that's what everyone plays. So yeah, that would be cool. Let's keep saying CP some more.
CP system.
So we have gotten to dig into this new CP system a bit more to see what it's all about. I think main thing, like we were just kind of getting at, it's overall less impactful to your character, to your build. It is impactful. I mean, it makes you a lot more powerful than you would be without it, but it's less than it is currently on the live server. Far less. So let's talk a little bit about the Warfare constellation. That's the blue constellation. It's split into basically 3 sections: damage, healing, and damage mitigation. And I want to kind of help listeners maybe avoid a little bit of a pitfall that I was falling into. I was having a really hard time spreading my champion points around and coming up with enough champion points to invest into things that I thought were important to my build. And I have 1,400 champion points, so I feel like that ought to be enough to kind of get a basic setup going there. The thing that I finally realized that I was running into is that I was putting points into like Elemental Defender and Hardy and those kinds of stars, which right now on the live server you basically have to put points into those to reduce those types of damage. So I was just thinking of the live server, just kind of trying to replicate my CP setup in this new system. But I was coming up short with points, and then it dawned on me that, well, my character now has this new 15% base mitigation, and that's about what I was getting from these stars in the previous system, about roughly 15% damage mitigation out of those. So if I just don't put any points into those at all, I'm already breaking even as far as damage mitigation goes. So I kind of just went with that and just said, okay, I'm just not going to put any points into Elemental Defender or Hardy, not even critical resistance. The critical resistance star, that's one that actually has to be slotted. I didn't realize that at first, but you have to put the points into it and then you have to slot it to get the extra critical resistance. And it's only maxed out. It only gives you 660 critical resistance. So that one's not even worth investing in, I don't think.
Yeah.
So in this Warfare blue tree, if you're a damage-focused character, I would say 100% ignore the damage mitigation-related stars. Don't touch them, and just invest in damage. Maybe a little healing if you feel like you need it. But I think really just investing in damage only is the way to go there. So just some of the stars I just wanted to mention so people have an idea of what they're going to see here. There's stars to increase individual max stats. If you put points and slot them, you can increase your weapon and spell damage, your crit rate, your crit damage and heals. You can increase your AoE damage, your single target damage, your damage over time. And then healing and damage basically have kind of a lot of corresponding stars. So you have stars that increases your AoE healing, your single target healing, your healing over time. Or you have stars that reduce the amount of damage you take from AoE or single target or damage over time. So they all kind of follow that similar sort of theme there.
Are these all stars you have to equip, or are these all the passive stars?
It's like a mix. I didn't really note which are which, but some of them you have to slot, some of them you don't. Okay. So like a lot of the damage mitigation ones you don't. They're just passive. Okay. There's one damage mitigation one that you do have to slot that I thought was pretty interesting. It's called Riposte. When you block, deal 4,800 physical damage to the attacker, and it has a 5-second cooldown. I feel like that's quite a bit of damage. 4,800 every 5 seconds. It doesn't sound like a ton, but That's almost as much as Flames of Oblivion, the Dragon Knight ability. You know, it deals about 5,000 damage every 5 seconds. You know, so you know, stack those two things together. Plus, there's other like armor sets and stuff that deal damage when you block and stuff. So I feel like you could do something nasty there.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's kind of all I had to say about Warfare. Did you have anything to add there?
I haven't had a chance to dive into the new CP system as much as I would like, but my biggest thing is I need to dive on there and see what's, you know, can be equipped and what's just considered passive.
Yeah, and they're not consistent with it. So, like...
That's the part that throws me off, is that I feel like that's going to change in the future.
Yeah, for example, like the star to increase your AoE damage, you have to slot that one, but the one to increase your AoE healing, that's passive. You don't have to slot that one. And I would think they would want you to have to slot it, because the whole idea seems to be to make you choose a path, and that's that's the build you're going for. So
that's interesting.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of people offer that same kind of feedback, like more stuff needs to be made slottable.
Yeah. That would be my hope is that the majority of the stars, when it's all said and done, would be slottable, and the passives would almost be much more rare than the slottable items.
Yeah, and just like really basic passives, I would say. The red constellation is now called Fitness. So this is where your defense comes in. So save all your CP investments for defense for the red tree. It's all defense related, and it's kind of based on playstyle. You kind of pick a playstyle and invest accordingly. So do you rely on movement and mobility to stay alive, or do you hold block to stay alive, or do you stack shields or whatever? You kind of, and it's kind of like the rest of them where you pick your specialty and then you go down that path. So there's a lot of the stuff that you would expect to see, like cost reduction for sprint and dodge and block. You can increase the amount of damage that you can block. You can just straight up increase your resistance. So there you go, right there. If you're tempted to put points into Elemental Defender and Hardy to increase your resistance, just save it for the red tree. It has its own pool of champion points, and you can just increase your resistance there.
It's weird that there's 2 of that, right?
Yeah, well, this is just like straight armor rating, whereas the others like reduce your damage against specific damage types.
I guess I'm just thrown off a little bit that the red is defense. You know, it's kind of the defense one, but Warfare has a damage mitigation section. I don't know. I guess
it does seem odd, but I agree with you. That does seem odd. It seems like that portion of Warfare would belong here, but I think with Warfare, that's where they're trying to make you choose one of the Trinity there, you know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I guess I can see that part of it.
So, some of these new stars I wanted to point out, there's a lot of stuff related to CC immunity. So, you can invest in stars that make you take less damage while CC immune, which we'll talk about this here in a minute, but there's a heavy armor passive that does that exact same thing. So that's interesting.
Kind of double down on that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also a star that reduces your sprint cost while you're CC immune. There's a star that increases the duration of CC immunity. I think that is really significant.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's another really interesting one here, Strategic Reserve. This is a slottable one. 50 health recovery per 10 ultimate that you have. So I figured that might find its way onto your Never-Ending Nord.
Oh, yeah. That might find its way onto a lot of my builds.
Yeah, it seems incredible.
I mean, yes, Never-Ending Nord, just because he's the health recovery build, but think of the Ulgent builds. I know they use it a lot, but, you know, Davius and Lord of Nords, they've always got ult. You know, it's always filling up on their bar, so to have that health recovery...
5,000. If you have 500 ults, that's 5,000 health recovery, just constant.
I could see that almost benefiting my Stam DK, Lord of Nords, more than Never Ending Nord, just because as a stamina DK, he struggles getting actually to the high damage characters. You know, he kind of is taking a beating. And so if he can kind of just hold on to that ult and have that health recovery to kind of help him out, and then once he actually gets there, I could see that being really beneficial.
There are multiple stars that are related to damage shields as well. So there you go, Magsorks. You have that.
Magsorks, you're fine. Don't worry.
So yeah, that's what fitness is all about. It's like, what is your kind of style of defense, and then go down that path. I think that's kind of neat. And then the green tree really isn't combat relevant at all. It's mostly crafting, mat farming, thieving, and some quality of life stuff as well. I'll just mention a few that I thought were noteworthy. You can invest into a star that makes you sell to merchants for more gold. You can get double yield from normal resource nodes. You can reduce your fall damage, reduce way shrine cost, increase your mount speed. The stuff related to thievery is like reduce sneak cost, get higher fence prices, bounty removal, better pickpocket loot, that kind of stuff. There's also a couple of stars related to fishing. So, it's kind of silly stuff, but I'm sure it's going to increase your quality of life quite a bit, I think. There's one that's like semi-combat related, the one that reduces fall damage. Like if you're in Cyrodiil, that's going to be relevant. You're going to take fall damage all the time there.
That just makes me, when you say that that's combat relevant, it just makes me think of that bug that was in a battleground where, I don't even remember which battleground it was, but you would fall off and it would be like an insane amount of fall damage and instantly kill you.
I'm not sure if it's what you're talking about, but there's, in that really tiny arena, there was a bug where specifically if a Dragon Knight leaped you near an enemy spawn,
yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was.
It would like register that you were up on their spawn and kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was always the fall damage that would get you. Random thought.
So anyway, that's pretty much all there is to the champion point stuff that I wanted to say here. Less impactful overall. It encourages you to choose a build type. You're not going to be able to just have everything the way you currently do with champion points. You're going to have to make decisions and decide what your build is and what you're willing to sacrifice in your build to gain other things. I mean, I like it. I'm a big fan of this. I think it's really smart. I think it's really cool. I
was just about to ask you that. I'm right there with you. I think this is a great direction to go. Obviously we do Battlegrounds, we do no CP, but I've always just, we do Imperial City a lot. I've always just looked at CP and really not given it much thought. It's like, all right, let me fill my points in real quick, and then I'm never going to look at this again. I love making that part of the game more interactive and more, stat-based for builds and more strategic. So I like the direction it's going. I'm really excited about it. I think it's good. My only initial thought is kind of what we mentioned. I wish there was less passives and more slottable abilities.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely not alone. I think that's some pretty common feedback that I've heard thrown around, that there should be more slottable stuff. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think the idea is good, even if they have to adjust some things in the future. I think they've done a really smart job here of making it overall less impactful. They've shifted so much of your power just to your base character, but still yet it's a robust system with plenty of room to grow into the future. As your character progresses, you still will be getting more and more powerful over time. Yeah. So they seem to have struck a really nice balance there. I'm really happy. I'm really happy with this. I think it's really cool, and I'm extra excited about the non-CP. It's really interesting because with these CP changes, it makes me really excited for the non-CP situation.
The other thing I was going to ask you, are you expecting to gain 50 CP levels the first Battleground daily you complete?
I actually did test that a little bit. I don't think so. I did a little bit of zombie farming at our normal spot there in Deshawn. I don't know, I spent maybe 10 minutes just doing laps, and I would check my champion bar every once in a while, and it did not perceptibly budge at all that entire time.
So you think it's going to take a while to get, it's going to take a long time to get that 3600 in your mind?
I think so. I think 3600 in their I don't think they're thinking of that as like an actual cap that very many people will reach.
Nobody will get there, but for the few that do.
I think it's like functionally no cap at all, really.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
How much CP would you say is required to have a comfortable CP build?
I would say probably 1,000.
Okay.
I would say you could probably have like a well-rounded build with really everything you need with about 1,000. Like you could probably get more with more than that, but like your base character is already so incredibly powerful. Like I feel like you have plenty to work with already, you know, like
the tricky part to this that I think is interesting is that in CP Imperial City and Cyrodiil, you know, in the past, if you jump in those and you weren't CP 810, you were at a huge disadvantage. And so I'm very interested to see what happens with this system.
Yeah, what is that inflection point where like, or even in PvE, like, you know, like in currently in veteran DLC dungeons, it's always you need to have 300 champion points if you want to step foot in here. Well, where is that cutoff now? Because that 300 champion points, the bulk of what that gave you, you just have that in your base character now. Yeah. So now what's the appropriate amount of CP to have for that content? You know, we got to figure that stuff out again.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But, and like you said 1,000 CP. I don't know the numbers, but I would imagine most players don't have 1,000 CP.
Yeah. I mean, that's just me kind of estimating. I have 1,400, and I was, you know, once I figured out not to put points into Hardy and Elemental Defender and all that, I had a very comfortable time, and I had like a bunch of extra points to kind of figure out what to do with. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think if you're currently at 810, if that's like where you're at is in the ballpark of the CP cap right now, I think you'll probably have a pretty easy time distributing those points and having an effective build with plenty of power. I think if you're an CP 810 and you come up with someone against someone like me with the CP 1,400, I don't think I'm going to be able to have all that much more power over you because of that slotting system. I might have a little bit of extra healing power, but another thing too is like the stars themselves give you so much less than they do in the old system.
That's a great point.
So even like a star that maybe used to give me like a 25% bonus to something now gives me maybe like an 8 or 10% bonus to that thing max if I totally max it out. So I don't think that a CP 1,400 will be all that much more powerful than a CP 810, especially at a certain point. I feel like if you have a certain amount of stats, like you have something to work with there. You ought to be able to make something happen with those stats.
Good point.
Anyway, let's talk more. So that's all about the champion points. I think, you know, we dug in there. We kind of have a better handle on things. I feel like when this patch drops, I'm going to have an idea of at least where to start to get my character set up with a good champion point distribution. I'm actually really looking forward to it. That's going to be cool. So moving on, let's go back to some of these armor changes that we talked about on the last episode. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that we talked about. So I was talking about how I wonder if we're going to start seeing builds that have like 3 light and 3 medium and stuff like that. And now that I've gotten in there and have looked at things and have tried things out, I don't think that's likely at all. I think probably most builds are going to keep using at least 5 pieces of their normal, their chosen armor type. I think it might become more common to wear all 7 medium or all 7 heavy or all 7 light, just because each piece is giving you an increase to those passives. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I could see maybe mixing heavy armor in weird ways. Like I could see maybe 4 heavy, 3 medium, or 3 heavy, 4 light. Something like that, because you're getting passives that all of those passives your build is going to benefit from. You're probably not going to mix and match light and medium like that. Right. I don't think. So I just kind of wanted to touch back on that. I also am wondering if the Undaunted Metal passive is even going to be important anymore for builds. Like when you weigh that against, like if I'm a light armor Magicka build, okay, do I need to have a medium and heavy to get an increase to my max stats? Or my max stats are already so huge, and I get additional light armor passes for each additional light armor piece. So is it better to just wear 7 light instead of 511?
It's gonna be interesting.
I don't know. It's just a question.
Yeah.
I'm just asking questions.
We don't have answers. We just ask the questions.
Yeah. You got to listen to the Answers podcast for the ESO Answers podcast. Another thing I wanted to follow up on. So also in the last episode, I was confused about these new penalties. Like if you're a light armor build, you take additional damage from martial attacks. And so I'm like, okay, you're telling me if I'm not wearing any armor, I take less damage from martial attacks than if I'm wearing light armor. And I wasn't accounting for the fact that, of course, the armor itself gives me additional armor. The armor itself gives me additional mitigation, 2 to 3% mitigation. So yeah, I'm taking 1% additional damage from martial attacks for a light piece of armor, but the armor itself is mitigating 2 to 3%, so it's subtracted from that. So I just wanted to touch base on that. You definitely are taking less damage if you're wearing the armor.
Don't run around with no armor.
Yeah. Oh, no armor. Kit Sparrowhawk said it's the meta, dude. Don't wear armor at all. Trust me. Another discussion I've seen going around a little bit is, and Davis, I think you might be happy about this.
Yeah, this is the big one for me.
It's looking like heavy armor might be incredibly strong in this next patch. It's already super strong in PvP. It's been the favorite since time immemorial, I think, pretty much. And as we've kind of broken these numbers down a little bit, it is looking incredibly strong. In particular because of this new bonus that gives you 2% damage reduction while CC immune per piece.
Yep.
So if you're using 7 heavy, that's 14% damage mitigation, which is more than what major protection gives you now.
Yeah.
Light and medium armor doesn't have anything like that gives you like that kind of damage mitigation. And while CC immune, if you're in a sweaty match, you're wearing heavy armor, so that means you're a brawler, you're up in the middle of all the action, you were getting CC'd on cooldown. You were basically in one of 2 states. You were either CC immune or CC'd, right?
Exactly.
So you're going to have an extremely high uptime on that 14% damage reduction that you're getting from this thing here. And the penalties, I'm not sure the penalties really balance it out. We just talked about like the increase from spell damage that you take is very minor. It's 1% per piece of heavy armor. The armor itself gives you way more mitigation than that, so no big deal there at all. The mobility penalties, really no big deal there at all either. You lose 1% sprint speed per piece of heavy armor. So 1 swift piece of jewelry is going to fully compensate you for that if you're in 7 heavy. Or you could switch it out and do 5 heavy, 2 medium. That'll totally fully compensate you for that. You get your sprint speed all the way back. Or just run Wild Hunt.
So, me and you joked about this. This was, my reaction with these heavy changes. It was kind of a panicked reaction. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, they're slowing us down. Like, I don't think, because I think I said, like, I'm not running heavy. It's going to be my least favorite. And I started thinking about it, and now that we've kind of had some time to really marinate with the PTS, it kind of reminded me, my first initial reaction, and then actually kind of seeing it, it reminded me of a while back when they did the race changes. It was like they announced these race changes, and they seemed huge and massive, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these changes. And then when we had time to really think about it, went back to look, it was like, these are actually very like these negatives and positives they're very minor. And that's kind of where I was with heavy armor with the negatives, is that exactly what you said, 5 heavy, 2 medium, that's probably going to be my go-to now. Because it'll immediately erase the sprint speed negative. And then you're still getting all these great positives from the heavy armor. So I think just thinking about slowing down, I didn't really actually, my initial reaction didn't really calculate, all right, it's really very easy to make up. It was just the terror of, oh my gosh, my stamina characters that don't have Wild Hunt are going to be even slower.
Yeah, and it's just sprint speed. It's not your in combat speed.
Yep. Yeah, that was the other thing is that I think my initial reaction was just speed. I don't want to be slower, but yeah, it's really a very minor deal.
Yeah. Same thing with the 3% cost dodge cost increase per piece. You could run 4 well fitted to compensate for that, or again 2 medium to largely compensate for that. And then the other penalty you get is a sneak detection increase, which is totally irrelevant. If you're wearing heavy armor, you're not trying to sneak around, so no one cares about that.
That's the one that I won't do it, just because I won't be able to sneak as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's like a non-penalty, because if you're wearing heavy armor, you're not trying to sneak. So I almost feel like that should be something different.
Yeah, it's crazy how much I've changed in a week, but that's what the first week of PTS is for. Is you overreact to things, and then you have a week to mellow and really think about it. I almost am kind of on the side now that heavy armor needs to kind of come down a bit.
Think about with champion points, 2%. So heavy armor bonus, 2% damage taken while CC immune per piece. There's a champion point star that does the exact same thing. It gives you 2%. It gives you damage reduction while CC immune, depending on how many points you put into it. And then there's another CP star that increases the duration of CC immunity.
Yeah, that's a crazy
with
star.
Heavy armor, all of that. Like, yeah, I think CP, you're going to see some super unkillable heavy armor brawlers.
I look at this and I think that it's very possible that we can expect that 2% becomes 1%. The 2% damage reduction per piece becomes a 1% damage reduction per piece.
I could easily see that. And even that would be pretty
great.
Impactful, but that might be the sweet spot, just doing that right there.
Yeah. I can see that change being a possibility in the future. But like you said, I'm happy about this. I have a lot of heavy armor builds. Most of my stamina builds run heavy armor. Because like you said, I like being up in the middle and tanky and in the fight. And so, I think that the only change I'll make is instead of going 5-1-1, I'll probably go 5 heavy to medium, and still get a little bit from the Undaunted medal, but really kind of make up for any negatives that I might be getting for running 5 heavy. Basically
just removes the negatives completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a neat little extra layer to theory crafting too, to kind of like balance those negatives out, like find that sweet spot in your build to get everything just right. It's kind of a neat little layer there. So if you haven't heard, it is Mid-Year Mayhem. This is a PvP event, correct?
I think so. I think
it's PvP related. I'm just always doing PvP anyway, so it's just like one day I log in and like, oh, I'm getting additional things now for doing PvP. So the event is going on right now. It ends Tuesday, February 9th. And basically you just get extra rewards for doing PvP related activities. I'm just been doing Battlegrounds, and I just get those gold boxes with my rewards. It gives me a nice little dopamine hit when I get those gold boxes. I like that.
Love getting the gold boxes.
One thing I'll say about Mid-Year Mayhem is that it's a great time to test the waters in PvP. If you are someone who maybe doesn't do a lot of PvP, it's a really great time because a lot of people are jumping in there right now, and you'll be surrounded by other players who maybe are not so experienced and stuff like that. So you can kind of have this safety in numbers and actually be able to run around and have a little bit of a good time without just getting nuked the first time you see an enemy player.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. It's also a good time for experienced PvPers too, because there are all of these kind of less experienced players around. You can kind of pretend that you're better than you really are for a little while, and so it's really great for everyone, I think.
Yeah, it is a great event, and as you say all the time, really in Imperial City in particular.
Oh yeah, love IC.
It kind of, to me, this has kind of become the Imperial City event.
Oh yeah,
like Battlegrounds and Cyrodiil are great, and it's great to jump in those, but it's like this is the time that Imperial City is like what everybody dreams it could be. Like it's full. There's activity everywhere. There's fights in the sewers.
We need to get in there Because I actually haven't done any Imperial Cities since this event has started, and you're totally right. We need to get in there.
Yeah.
And
Me and you both love this event just because, like you said, you get rewards for doing stuff that I do regularly. So it's just kind of like extra rewards. So I'm always a fan of it. But it's kind of a tough time for us specifically just because, they just announced, the expansion release, the new trailer, this new PTS. And so that is really where most of my attention's been, is kind of looking and theory crafting for the new upcoming changes and looking at new sets. For me, it's kind of kept me away from Mid-Year Mayhem much more than where I would normally like to be.
I've been queuing up for BGs a little more than usual, which seems impossible, but
That's
just the queues are so fast right now. So it's a joy to just queue up, get right in within 5 minutes or less, have a full match almost every time. And kind of just like what we were talking about with Imperial City, there's a more variety to the skill level of players that you come across. Like up to this point, especially with my like StamPlar, who I've really been playing with a lot lately, every match is super sweaty. Every single player I see is like the best player I've ever seen, and it's just like I'm struggling every moment, which that is fun in its own way. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy those sweaty matches, but here it's more of a spectrum. You see some players that are less experienced. You see some players that are more experienced. It's kind of balanced in that way. And I get more kills. I die less. So of course I'm going to enjoy it a little more, but it's not like I'm just dominating the map. I'm still coming across people who put me in my place and that sort of stuff as well. So anyway, I've just been kind of enjoying that about it.
Yeah.
Still spending quite a bit of time with Bobby Bobango, my Necromancer bow build. I talked about him last week. 5 pieces Sheer Venom, 5 pieces Poisonous Serpent, Black Rose Prison Bow. I need to farm out that Vatishran two-hander for the back bar, just to stack the weapon damage. I'm not going to use the heavy attack thing because that heavy attack proc is a melee thing, and this is a ranged build. But
it's nice just to have that. It's just passive weapon damage.
Yeah, just to have those stacks of weapon damage. His back bar is just a buff bar. All he does back there is buff up and heal. So just extra weapon damage. Mm-hmm. Why not? Just have that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you a little worried about Bobby's future?
Yeah. I have written here on my notes here, Bobby's days might be numbered because of what we've all been talking about. He's very much a proc focused build, and proc builds basically are getting hugely nerfed when this patch goes live.
Nerf by being left out. Everything else is getting buffed. They're staying the same.
Yeah, it's funny how they're not actually being directly altered at all. But yeah, those builds are getting nerfed. But yeah, we'll have to see. I really like this build. It's such a fun build to play. So I hope he remains somewhat viable, or maybe some version of the build. Maybe I can change it in some way where it is stat based, but it also still plays in a very similar kind of way.
I just can't imagine this build being completely phased out. Like, it's so over the top right now that even if it comes down a couple pegs, I can still see it being very, very effective.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as convinced as you are.
Hey, I've been on the other side of this build.
So a couple of changes I've made to this guy since the last episode is, one, I became part of the problem, and I slotted Bombard on my bar. It was a flex spot that I had Camo Hunter and Shuffle. I would kind of go back and forth between those two, but now it's just Bombard. Main reason is just because stealth enemies. Before, this build didn't really have an answer to stealth at all. And I've always said in the past, that's just a weakness of the build. I accept it. Otherwise, he's amazing. But we're in a situation now where stealth isn't just for Nightblades anymore. It seems like everybody is turning invisible all the time now. And not having an answer to stealth just isn't acceptable in a PvP build now, as far as I'm concerned. You got to have it. You have to have something.
We were doing a battleground, and it was... I guess a land grab, but that has flags, so that's a whole nother thing. But we had an entire team come out of stealth on us. It was the craziest thing. I don't know if you remember that specific match.
Oh man, I'm seeing Dragon Knights.
Yeah, it's
gank
like
people out of stealth.
What is going
Wardens.
on?
It's
just
ridiculous.
Everybody's disappearing.
So Bombard, the bow ability, it's an AoE spammable. It also roots and snares everyone that it hits. It's an OP ability, honestly. I should have been using it all along. So it's great if people go into stealth, you can just kind of spam that wherever you think they might be, and it'll pull them out and root and snare them. So it's a great trolley ability. It also like makes people angry. Like whenever you spam it into a group, you'll see people immediately turn and start focusing.
That's the thing about
people
Bombard.
are sick and tired of Bombard spam.
Once you used it, it's not like you can go back now.
Yeah. I've also switched to using weapon crit potions, so the ones that give you stamina, health, and weapon critical. So it's basically just a tri-stat, except you get that crit instead of magicka, because he doesn't need the magicka. He just has the armor buff and the spirit mender. Those aren't really like super demanding on his magicka pool, so just having that crit is good. I am worried because this has become one of my very favorite builds, and I think he's probably going to drop several pegs this next patch unless I totally revamp him pretty considerably. So we'll see.
Yeah, just have to wait and see. I don't even want to. I don't even want to talk about old Bard of Sovngarde. He's
all right. We'll just skip him, and
by the time I get the precise regeneration staff, as you just said, that's what made me think of him is. We're talking about proc builds and how they're kind of go away. Well, Bard of Sovngarde he's going to be all about a proc build.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I finally got my proc build together, guys.
And it's going to go away. So I'm just going to attach to the hope that this build will remain good with the new patch. It's 5 Overwhelming Surge, 2 Grothdar, front bar Vadastrand Destro, the back bar someday a precise regeneration Maelstrom.
Theoretically, Maelstrom Resto.
And then the Malakath, and then 2 Peace Trainee. Just a little update, just the announcement. I plan to do my daily Maelstrom run after we record. It'll be run 33. We're on now run 33.
33 runs, not a single restoration staff.
Resto staff. 33 runs, no resto staff.
That is brutal, man.
And even more frustrating, like my last 5 runs in a row, I've gotten the dual wield weapons. And that might be...
Oh my god, they're just taunting you.
Yeah, that's like the worst weapon drop in the place.
Yeah, that's like the least usable one. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It was like 4 or 5 in a row. I've got so many dual wield mails. Oh gosh.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Bad. It's getting real bad.
It's funny, this build is almost exactly the same as my Mag DK that I talked about on the last episode. So you're using 5 Overwhelming, 2 Grothdar. Really, the only difference is the Vadastrand staff. Yep. You're using the Vadastrand staff, and I'm using the Black Rose Prison staff. Both are super strong, but otherwise, they're identical builds. Except yours is a Templar, mine's a Dragon Knight.
Right. But that's the dream, is to run those 2 together.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to just be... they have just enough support that I think them together, they're going to be provide enough support. And
all that AoE.
Yeah, just AoE for days.
You'll have heals on your back bar. I'll have some heals as well, plus some crowd control that'll help us out. I think those 2 are going to be like make people upset kind of duo.
Well, and like you said, it works out well because yours definitely it deals a lot more damage than mine, but mine is going to have more support. And so they just theoretically really, really balance each other out. Really
I don't know. Is it? I mean... I feel like their damage is going to be very comparable. I mean, their damage is coming from basically the same sources. I have a bit more AoE potential with the Black Rose Prison staff versus the Vadastrand staff. Yeah, but that's about it, though.
I just can't imagine I've seen.
You'll have jabs, though.
That's true. Got the good jabs. I just can't imagine dealing the damage that Misato deals. That's really the biggest part. It's just
I think get ready for it. I think you're going to. That's the thing, is like this build is absolutely functional right now, and you just refuse to play with it until you get that resto staff.
Was so excited. I was such a innocent young, foolish ESO player several weeks ago.
Is there any other arena resto staff that you have that would...
Nope. No. I could put...
You could just do a potentates.
Well, I think I just grabbed a gold resto staff that I had, so it's just a nothing right now. Random. I could grab... I could make the Vadishran resto staff. I could put that on there. That's not bad for a back bar resto staff, but it's just out of spite at this point. I'm coming after you, ESO devs. You used to be on my side. Now this is them trolling me.
The only other build I've been playing with is just Betsy, my StamPlar, as always. She's always in the rotation.
Betsy.
Even if I don't mention her on an episode, you can always assume she's in the rotation for sure. And especially at times like this when we're like getting ready to transition from one meta to a very different meta, I always gravitate back to Betsy because she's like my baseline. Like I know how she's supposed to perform. I know how she's supposed to feel. So as we step into this new meta, she's kind of she's the character I focus on to kind of get my bearings and all that sort of stuff. And what's really nice about her is she's always been pretty resilient to meta changes because I've never really tried to follow the meta with her very hard. Like I've always had a very specific idea of what this character is and how she plays and all that sort of stuff. And she's basically remained equally effective across all these different meta shifts. And I think that's going to remain the case here. I think she's actually going to be more powerful in this next PvP meta than she has been in this current one because she's not a proc build. So she's going to be looking really good. I don't think I'm going to change anything about her gear at all. It's 5 pieces Bone Pirate, 5 pieces Deadly Strikes on the front bar with a 2-handed maul, Master Bow on the back bar, 1-piece Molag Kenna, and Ring of the Wild Hunt. It's 7 medium. She's an orc, 4 well fitted, very, very fast, speedy, nimble, tons and tons of sustain. And now with this new patch on PTS, oof, it is absurd. And I know it's not, everyone's going to be in the same boat. So I know it's not as outrageous as it sounds, but she's pushing like almost 7,000 weapon damage on PTS. Outrageous. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that Betsy I might go back to maining Betsy again. I mean, she's never not been my main, but I think she honestly might be like my actual very best character this next patch.
Betsy just takes new patches and just eats them up. No big deal. Yeah. What else you got?
She always performs great every single time. Like I've said it lots of times before. She's not the character that I get the best kill counts with, but she just consistently performs very well every single match. She never has a bad match. Whereas like with Misato, for example, she might get like a 32-0 match, but then she might have like a much worse, like a 5-8 match the next one, depending on what kind of group support she has and that kind of stuff. So
good old
whereas Betsy's always going to go like 10-0, you know, in that kind of ballpark there.
I always feel great joining into a battleground with Betsy. It's and really, you know, just the classic matchup of Davius and Betsy. There's just, you know, in the past we've always joked it's just home. You know, we're just going home.
Oh yeah, you and your MagPlar main healer, me on Betsy. That's what it's all about. And those two, I think, will be a very viable combo again.
Yeah.
Like again, man, I want this new patch to drop. We need it.
I'm excited. I can't explain how excited I am that Davius is going to be able to drop a staff on his front bar and then he's just going to dual wield axes.
Yeah.
It's going to be
totally
so much fun just to see that happen.
Who's that guy with the big axes over there? Oh, that's our healer.
That's our healer. Watch out.
What? What's the funny look for?
What are you trying to say?
He's going to heal us with those axes.
He will not do a point of damage with those axes. They're all about the heals.
Yeah, he looks really intimidating with those axes. Oh, he wouldn't dream of harming you with those big sharp blades in his hand.
That's gonna be fun. I hope that works out. But
yeah,
I'm excited for that small little tidbit. So the other character that I have been tinkering with And I've talked about Bear Claw, Bear Claw the Nord, my stamina warden. I've talked about him in the past and how well he's run with your MagPlar, and it's been interesting. It's been an interesting ride with old Bear Claw.
It always is.
Always is. The kind of early initial matches with Bear Claw, he was just shredding. His pets were just killing everything in sight. People couldn't touch him. But maybe more than most of my characters, as the MMR has climbed and it's gotten to just the elite sweaty matches, his efficiency has struggled. It's 5 Unfathomable Darkness, 5 pieces of Defiler, and then 2 pieces Maw of the Infernal. So he's got the crows flying around him. He's got the Defiler, that thing that pops up and summons. The Maws, Daedras popping up and getting summoned. I use the Bear ult, so that's getting summoned. The whole front bar is the entire Animal Companion, so I got the Netch floating around me. And so I've kind of started tinkering with him. You know, I mentioned when they released those new sets, I was really intrigued by the new pet set that increases your damage. You know, I looked at it and I put it on the build. It's a 5-piece build. You have to have 5 pieces to get that 16%. And I just immediately went back to, or I could just throw the Malakath band on there. That's 1 piece and it's 25% everything. Yes, I lose the crit, but it's just so much bigger, you know.
Procs don't benefit from crit.
Exactly. And so it was this thing where it was like that piece is so powerful that it immediately wipes out brand new sets that I think could be really cool, but they're just nothing next to that. So you're talking about 1 piece you can throw on the build, or this entire 5 piece that I could throw on the build.
Yeah, if Malakath only applied to active abilities, then that would be a reason to use that 5-piece set instead, because that would be able to apply to your procs, whereas Malakath can't.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that Malakath, that's that 5-piece set, I have to damage an enemy, and then my pets deal 16% more damage to that enemy. Malakath,
after they get these stacks, right? Is there like a stacking thing?
No, that one doesn't have any stacks.
Oh, okay, it's a mark.
Yeah, they just have a mark for 10 seconds. But
okay.
That enemy is the only one with that mark, and it's only my pets that are getting the increased damage to that enemy. It's, you know, it's I think it's a really cool set. I love the idea of the set, but that just doesn't compare to Malakath Band at all. I think after all of this, I think old Bear Claw's probably going to stick with the build he has, with the testing. And I swapped out different sets. You know, I swapped out Malakath. I swapped out the Ritualist. I took Unfathomable off. I took Defiler off. You know, I switched them all around. And I think he felt the best with all of the summons.
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion we drew. Is like, well, all those setups seem to deal in a ballpark of a similar amount of damage, but your original setup is the one that's the most chaotic, the most in alignment with your initial idea for the build. So it's probably the best just to stick with that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was. I'm really happy I did the test. I think I'm still gonna play with Bear Claw. I still think he's a lot of fun. It's just gonna, you know, I just kind of have to accept him for what it is. He's a fun character. I have a lot of fun with him.
I think of him as a form of support, really.
Yeah, it's kind of he kind of it's like CC without CC. It's just his CC is all these things running around getting in the way of
and providing
other players,
like providing supplemental damage and just like making things confusing for enemies and stuff like that. I definitely think that his presence makes a difference for sure.
Yeah, I think he's a good character. He's just not going to be top of the line character, which I'm okay with that. He is very much a fun build, and I do have a lot of fun with him. And I kind of was happy that one, just from a resource standpoint, but I was kind of happy that I think I'm going to stick with this. I am curious, you know, always send us emails if you guys have ideas for Bear Claw with his pet stamina build. I'm always, you know, we always love feedback, and if you guys have any ideas, I'm always curious. But really, all this testing and all these things, it really just kind of led me to being just wanting Malakath nerfed.
Yeah, that's you and everyone else.
Yeah,
literally, like not a single PvPer would disagree with you. I don't think. Well, you had asked for people to email you ideas about that, that's a perfect opportunity for me to move on to our emails section. Let me just read this email here. Never mind. There is no email.
Streak is broken. I don't think we mentioned emails last week. Maybe we did. I can't remember. But that was the strategy to avoid the streak being broken.
I thought you wouldn't notice.
You broke it.
So no emails this week, but if you would like to send us an email, you can do that by sending an email to scrollinpodcast@gmail.com. That is scrollin with an I-N, scrollinpodcast@gmail.com. Ask us a question, tell us a joke, tell us we were wrong about something, really whatever you like, as long as you're nice and polite. We also have a guild named Stoon's Goons. You can also email us to request to be invited to the guild. We're primarily a social guild with a little bit of a PvP focus, and we really just do a lot of, really just a little bit of everything. And we do a lot of theorycraft discussion. It's really just kind of a continuation of what we do here on the podcast, just kind of continued throughout our lives through the guild and Discord and all that sort of stuff. So that's Stoon's Goons. You can hit us up in-game on PCNA. I'm at Ket Sparrowhawk. Davius is at Starjumper. And I believe that is going to conclude this episode. We'll see you next time.
What's going to happen is I'm going to get the staff like 2 days before this patch, and in the last patch notes they're going to be like, oh, and we changed the
nerfed the hell out of it.
We changed the Maelstrom Resto.
No longer works with Templars. That's the only change.
Just delete the character. Just delete.